So in the previous video, we just finished talking about how to apply for a job at United Nations. Now let's understand everything that we actually talked about before, the levels and now the salary scale and everything else and the post adjustment and all that stuff. So you can really understand in depth what will be your salary, what level should you apply for, because not everybody can apply at high level, what level should you apply for that you have a good chance of getting a job at the beginning. And of course, if you are already like 20 years of experience in the workforce, you cannot apply for, let's say, a P2 entry level job because then you'll be overqualified. However, it's not likely you'll be able to get a P5 at the UN without actually having the experience within the UN system. Some people do. A friend of mine actually did that. However, this is rare. So let's talk about that. So there's a lot to unpack, so let's begin. First of all, we'll talk about one position, we'll take it out of the way, which you cannot apply for, okay? You can win it, you can get a job thanks to it, but it's not something you can apply on that level, and this is the P2 youth professionals. Now, this is a competition that happened in New York and Geneva and other countries around the world, organized by the United Nations in order to source talent. So you can apply for this. If you're selected to participate, then you will go, you will do some tests, and if you succeed in your test, then you will get a job at the United Nations as a P2 professional. Now, this is rather prestigious. It's a very low-level entry job. However, it is prestigious in the sense that the UN will know that you were heavily tested against high-level competitors and that you won. So that means you're very, very good. And it's more than one person who will win it, and you'll be on the list. So that way, if you get recruited in the future, if they have post opening, they're going to take from that list before other candidates, which is kind of cool. All right, so P2. P2 is really your level entry. You have zero experience in the world. You basically apply for a job at the UN because you just graduated with a master's degree or a bachelor's degree from university. You might have a year or two of experience. Maybe you've done an internship at the UN or something like that, or you did some participation in NGOs. This is the level you'll arrive at the United Nations. Of course, you can enter at a higher level. That's not an issue. But generally at that age, when you're in your 20s, this is where you will start. P3. This is where most people at the UN are. Okay, the P3 level is basically considered, like not a high level. It's a mid-level professional, so international staff. So that is, generally full diplomatic status, maybe not tax exemption in some countries. It depends. Generally, that starts at P4. Generally, the people that do that is what we call officers. So essentially, people that would be in accounting or maybe management, not actually having many staff unless you manage general service staff, which we'll talk after. And these are the jobs that are core jobs at the UN that you would do, like your basic human resource, asset management, stuff like that. Not the low-level jobs like driver or something like that. That would be more G staff. We'll talk about it later. P4. Now, P4, these are your specialists, okay? Yeah, of course, there are some management posts at P4, but generally P4 is considered the specialist post. So if you work at the IAEA as a, nuclear inspector or something like that, people were actually laughing and trying to determine Brad Pitt in the World War Z. Which level would he be at? Well, technically a P4 level, okay? UN investigator or something like that, an inspector would be at P4 level. These are your common professionals. So if you're a doctor, for example, and you're going to go work at the WHO, this is probably the post they're going to give you, P4 level. This is also a bit of higher level with some level of management, but you're not the chief of the unit. P5, now you're starting to have a unit of yourself. So you're going to be like, chief financial officer, chief budget, chief human resource, for example, not head of mission, but if the mission is very small, yeah, that would be a P5. So if you have let's say 20, 30 staff in a small region, the person will not be a director. It's going to be a P5. So chief of the mission, for example, that's P5 level. So now you manage maybe 20 staff, 30 staff. You have to have at least 15 years of experience, not in the UN, but 15 years of experience in a work as a manager. Now you got your D job, D1 and D2. Basically, these are the directors. This is right below the FSG, basically the Secretary General and stuff like that. These are your high-level director job. You might have 100 employees. These are people that are probably in their 50s, 60s. They're about maybe, I don't know, 10 years from retirement, I would say. That's it. You're not really likely to be able to get in at that level because there might be only 3 to 4 people at that level per organization. So that's your D post. Now let's talk about the G. These are locals. Okay, so that's not an international job. So if you're, for example, Canadian and you work in Canada, you'll have a G post, not a P post. To have a P post, you would have to be posted, let's say, in another country, US, for example, if you're Canadian. Now G2, there are very few. G3, you're gonna start having drivers and stuff like that. At G4, you have maintenance staff like secretaries, basic level. Maybe G5, you're gonna have, accounting assistant or something like that, the grunt work, data entry, stuff like that. People that will handle the paperwork, stuff, maybe handling travel for the staff. This is your local staff. That's the G post. G6, you might be more in the management position, but you're still going to report to a P. So you're local, you're reporting to a P, but you might have a few employees or a full section, maybe 20 employees under you as G6. But this is local. So a Canadian, for example, cannot apply for a G position in Switzerland. You would have to apply for a P post. Now, G6 in salary equal about P2. So just to give you an idea. So the highest paid local staff make the lowest of the lowest salary of an international staff, just to give you an idea. So this is the organigram of what it looks like. So the SG post, the Secretary General, okay, so the Secretary General, for example, of WHO, okay, for example, would be politically appointed, okay, which was the case with Margaret Chan before, who used to be she's a Hong Kongese Canadian. She was the health minister. Now she was appointed politically to that post. It's not a position that you really apply for. It's a position that you work toward, and you don't have to be part of the UN for that. Actually, some people have started their own UN organization, okay? So that's a position that you actually gather sufficient amount of support from sufficient amount of country offices and government around the world so that they can say, okay, yeah, we're appointing you based on that. That's a political post. Then you can have your D1 and D2. There's not much a difference between D1 and D2. It's just that eventually a D1 that's been there for a long time may become D2 just to have an increase in salary and just as a reward, but generally there's no difference in their responsibility. They would manage P5, that would in turn manage P2, P3. They are very few organizations as P1. That's why I'm not really mentioning it. It's a hedge case. They're also going to manage contractors, which are temporary. And then beneath that, you're going to have the local staff that are going to be managed by either P3 or P5 underneath the umbrella of the Secretary General and the Ds. That's it. So this is how the structure looks like. So now let's discuss the salary in relation with the level. And if you've seen 3 new levels that I have not talked about, then we're going to talk about it now. The FS, which is field staff. Now the field staff is a bit of a complicated thing. The idea of the field staff is if, let's say, you are in, I don't know, let's say Somalia, for example, and the UN cannot hire locals, first of all, because maybe they don't have the training or they don't have the experience, the education, or there's risk of corruptions and stuff, and hiring local makes no sense. They will have the field staff, which will allow them to hire people, let's say former police officer from New York or something like that, a custom officer somewhere, former military. This would be the type of people that would work in the field. They're international. They get very high salaries, much more than the local, but not all the benefit that the P would get, like the diplomatic immunity and tax-free stuff like that. They may not get all of it, but they will get a lot of benefit and quite high salaries. So this is the advantage. And since they're generally going to work in D and E duty station, then they have the hardship allowance and a lot of things. So the salary end up being very high despite not having all the benefit of the Ps. So this is your FS1 all the way to FS7. And we're talking all the way to $90,000 for those. All right, you could apply for these posts. They're listed online, and we already talk about that. And I'm going to continue talking about them and how to apply for this position. We're going to discuss that further. All right, now you got your GS staff, general service staff. Now, if you're wondering why the gap is so high from, you know, $5,600 all the way to $68,000 and sometimes even more than that, the reason is the location. So you're a local staff, and let's say the salary would be, I don't know, like maybe $300 a month in the Philippines. Well, of course, if you work for the UN, they're going to pay you way more, but they're not going to give you $68,000 because then that makes absolutely no sense. The other way around is also valid. If you're a Swiss citizen, your salary more than likely will be $4,000 or $5,000 a month. So, of course, having a salary like that, if you work for the UN, they have to compensate a little more. So you're going to have a salary of $70,000. They cannot give you $5,000, right? So this is why the gap is so vast, because it encompasses every country from, you know, Ethiopia, where very low salary, all the way to, again, Switzerland, New York, which are very high salaries. Now, for the G staff, of course, you have to be a local. So an American can work as a G staff in the US. The minute that he goes working, let's say in Canada or Switzerland or somewhere else, then he would become a P automatically. Now, P2, P3. Now, if you're wondering why 37,000, why the professional make less than the local, they're not, okay? This is without benefit, without the post adjustment. And we're going to talk about the post adjustment at length as well in the next slide. So you're going to understand that very quickly. So 37 to 80, and then after that you get your P4, you can make all the way to $100,000, and then you're gonna have your D all the way to 120. But this is without post adjustment. So let's talk about that next. Okay, post adjustment. Now this is to compensate the staff in order to get a uniform salary pretty much around the world. So if you're a P3, for example, at step 5, and we'll discuss that at length, okay, you need to make the exact more or less same salary and have the exact same level of, you know, let's say livelihood around the world in order to make it fair. So this is where the post adjustment work. This is an amount of money that you get on top of your salary. It's a percentage per country, representative of the cost of living in the country. So here, for example, we have a P3 at $80,000 salary. Now, the guy lives in Switzerland, so now we're talking 88% post-adjustment. So now $78,000 of post-adjustment, he makes $158,000. If the same person, same position, same level, same everything, live on the island of Cyprus, for example, the post-adjustment there is 19% because it's much cheaper to live in Cyprus than Switzerland. Then the post-adjustment is only $15,000, and that person makes now $95,000. And this is the way the salaries are calculated. So when you're going to look, and I'm going to have the link in the description below, when you want to move to a country and you want to see how expensive it is to live there, the UN post adjustment is a very good way to figure it out. Now, there's a lot of politics in this, okay? So sometimes post adjustment might be very high if they feel that they cannot recruit staff. So it's not always representative only of the country's, let's say, financial situation or how much it costs to live there. It's also if they don't have many staff that want to work there, then they might increase that post adjustment in order to get more people there. You know, otherwise they wouldn't be able to have some people. And when you're going to move around the UN, a lot of people in the UN will move 10 times, for example. The idea is this: they're going to check to make sure that, you know, with the post adjustment, they're not losing too much on the salary scale, because otherwise, you know, it's pretty bad, right? So I understand that you're going to have more compensation on your rent and stuff, but still, you know, making $160,000 is much better than making 85, depending on the country you're in. So now you know exactly everything about the level system and the salaries. You know where you fit. You know exactly what kind of job you should look at your level, at your experience. Do it. Now, in the next video, what we're going to talk about, we're going to start talking about the type of contracts, because this is super important. There's a few pitfalls and different kinds of things that the UN has modified lately. You need to know before you apply, because I don't want you to jeopardize your career before it even starts. See you in the next video. Give me the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. All right, see you in the next video.